Hi there, my name is Jessica Ban and I'm the International Programs Coordinator for the College of Arts and Letters. And I also help administer the Mundt Scholarship for International Internships in Peace and Security. And today this info session will cover the scholarship, how you can be eligible for the scholarship, how to go ahead and locate and secure an internship of your own abroad, as well as the application process that you would need to complete, which has changed this year. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So the Mundt Scholarship for International Internships is a competitive scholarship with the goal of funding students to participating in a service-oriented internship abroad in either an NGO, governmental aid agency, humanitarian organization, or a nonprofit social agency. There sometimes are exceptions to that, but that's the majority of the types of placements that would be eligible for this scholarship. The international internship must address social welfare, health, educational, cultural, and environmental problems, or social and economic inequalities. For eligibility, there's no minimum overall GPA. All class levels are eligible. All majors are also eligible, and you do not need to be a full-time student. The criteria for the internship, this is really important because sometimes students will apply for this scholarship and they really haven't selected an internship that would make them eligible for this scholarship. So the internship needs to be at least 2 months in length. That's really important. If it's less than that, you will not be eligible for the program. It needs to be service-oriented in nature, and that includes work with an NGO, governmental aid agency, combined public-private aid and peace agency, humanitarian organization, or social agency. And the internship must address issues such as social welfare, health, educational, cultural, or environmental problems, or social and economic inequalities. And you must also be enrolled in a course related to the internship. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit because that can sometimes be a little bit confusing to students for how, if they're securing and locating their own internships abroad that aren't necessarily affiliated with school, how they can then link that to credit here at SDSU. How does the credit aspect work? Okay, so there's two main ways to go about linking the internship that you select to credit. The first option is to link it to credit at SDSU. For instance, and this I would say is one of the more popular ways that students will do this is they will take an independent study through their major. So let's say you're an anthropology major or an Africana studies major, for instance, is what you can see here on the presentation. So you would work with your department, usually your major advisor, although it can be someone else from within the department. And you would enroll in, for instance, for Africana Studies, in Special Studies, AFRAS 499. Most majors have a 499, which that's the independent study course. It might be different in your department, and you should speak with your major advisor to see what it is in your department to do an independent study. But essentially, a student will work with a faculty member in their department, and it really is up to what that professor requires for their independent studies. But a lot of times a student will just essentially do a research project or a research paper, and they'll work independently, but then they might have check-ins regularly with their faculty member that they're working with. So that's one way to go about that. And you would register for the course, essentially the normal way you would register for an SDSU course. And I'll talk about when that would take place in a second. Another option is you might have an actual internship course number that you have through your major. For instance, sustainability has Sustainability 495, which is internship in sustainability. And for that major, they actually have a requirement to do an internship and do a study abroad. So that's why they've kind of crafted an actual course number. Some majors might not have a specific course number that you can use, but if you do, that might be the best way to go ahead and pursue that, because you're actually maybe already fulfilling a requirement of your major by taking that course. Got to keep in mind though, when is the course offered? You will need to take the course before, during, or after. Will you need to take the course before, during, or after your internship? Some majors, for instance, would require that students take it in the fall, but they plan to do their internship in the summer. Now, normally you have to take your course concurrently, meaning at the same time as your internship experience. However, on a case-by-case basis, we can approve courses students taking those courses either before their internship experience or after their internship experience, although ideally we do want students to take it concurrently if that is a possibility. Another thing you need to keep in mind is, have you checked with your major advisor or the instructor for the internship course to confirm your internship program will work with this internship course number? You need to check with them. If you're looking at doing maybe a sustainability internship in Costa Rica, you need to check with them to make sure that that work that you will be doing will fulfill their requirement. You will also need to seek approval from the professor, and you should definitely do this before you apply to the program. So I'll talk about the application process in a little bit, but you can't just say in your application, oh, I'm going to take this course, this independent study, and not speak with the professor, because we will actually, when we're going through the applicants, we'll actually confirm that you've reached out to that professor and that's a viable option for you. It's not, you can't just simply state you're going to do something without having confirmed that it's possible and that it's a realistic way that you'll be able to complete that requirement. Another option is to receive credit through a program provider. And you see that it says if applicable, because you might not work with a program provider. And I'll explain what a program provider is in the next few slides, because that's usually not clear to students. But some program providers will offer credit through an accrediting institution that they work with. Let's just make up an institution. Maybe there's an institution in Pennsylvania that they work with that program provider, which is a company. So you would actually receive credit from that institution. And it would be maybe a good option for you if your department does not offer a specific course number or an independent study isn't an option for you. And that has happened before, where a student just can't do an independent study. They don't have someone they can work with, or their department doesn't offer a specific course number, and they end up enrolling, working with a program provider and receiving credit through that program provider. Another thing to keep in mind is cost. The cost may or may not be more expensive than the credit you receive here at SDSU. If you're an in-state student, it's more likely that taking the credit here at SDSU, either through an independent study or through an internship course number, will be the more cost-effective option. If you're out-of-state student, maybe you find that actually going through a program provider would actually be a cheaper way to receive the credit for that internship. Okay. So some other things to keep in mind as you search for an internship. So we kind of have covered the credit aspect, the eligibility, but let's now talk about the internship itself and how you go about that process. So before we look at how you will find one, you really need to keep these kind of components in your mind. The length of an internship, it has to be, as I mentioned, a minimum of 2 months. It can be longer, but it definitely needs to be at least 2 months. As you're looking at options, if you notice that they require you to have an intermediate level of Spanish and you aren't at that level, it's not going to be a good option for you. You won't be successful. So definitely keep in mind what the language ability would be for that internship. If you go through a program provider, they'll definitely let you know. If you are finding an internship on your own, which I'll talk about that's a question that you'll need to ask to make sure that you are set up for success and you will be able to make that contribution to that organization. The internship must be for credit, and how will you accomplish this? So as you're looking, keep that in mind, what we've already talked about, and then the cost of the experience. You will need to create a budget for this program in your application. So as you're looking at all the options, think about cost. Now, the intent of the scholarship is to cover the entire cost of the program, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So be mindful of that. And you really want to find a way to kind of add up those costs that would be associated with this experience, because you will need to provide that information at the very end. So it's good to do that from the beginning. Okay, so this is usually the most important question that students have. They think it's great, the idea of being able to do an internship abroad, but they have no idea how to go about accomplishing that. So now I'm going to kind of cover the 3 main ways that you can utilize to go ahead and locate and then secure, which is the hardest part typically, an internship abroad. So the first one, the most obvious, just so you can see this, option 1 is to locate the internship on your own. This is the way you would normally find a job, is you conduct research on various organizations or companies, and in this instance, you're going to be looking at ones that operate abroad. And then you're going to apply directly with that organization. This is not the most common option because it can kind of be intimidating to students and they find it to be overwhelming. having to do this, but it's totally feasible. We have had many students who go on to receive the scholarship who went about they found their internship on their own and they applied directly through that organization, and they ended up going on and receiving the scholarship and then were able to do that internship. With this process, if you do select this option, you will also need to complete the petition process through Aztecs Abroad for your independent internship. I will be embedding this presentation on a website that I'll later go over in a second, so you will be able to find this, but essentially the petition process, you can definitely find that on Aztecs Abroad. In fact, I'll just go ahead and click here real quick just to show you what it looks like. But here you have Aztecs Abroad, and you would click this one here, petition for independent internship. Okay, so let's go move on. So I want to quickly kind of highlight or have a little spotlight of a student who did this type of internship. She found an internship on her own and went ahead and used that in her application when she applied for this scholarship. So Abby located and secured her own internship. She applied directly for her internship through the US Department of State's Student Internship Program. During her 10-week internship, Abby worked in the Regional Security Office. Her work included presenting research to US and Estonian officials, working with law enforcement, and speaking on local Estonian students about American and Estonian relations and security issues. She did this in the summer of 2018. She said she had a great experience. And I would like to kind of point out something that might be obvious, but when you apply for directly with an organization, larger organizations, they might actually have an internship program already set up. So in this instance, she applied to this Department of State student internship program. Larger, maybe nonprofits, organizations might have something comparable, so there's something to apply to. Smaller organizations that maybe have never received an intern before, especially an intern from the United States, they might not have that set up. So you would likely be kind of reaching out to them on your own, maybe providing a resume, definitely a cover letter, and introducing yourself, letting their organization know that you're very interested in the work they do, you'd like to learn more, and you would love to have the opportunity, if it would be possible, to do an internship with the organization, and just kind of seeing how that goes. They may or may not get back, but that's definitely an option, especially for those much smaller organizations and companies that just don't have the capacity to create a formal internship program, or maybe have never even thought about doing something like that. You can be the first. Okay. So option 2, you can take advantage of the great connections SDSU faculty members already have here on campus. Speak with your professors who conduct research abroad, for instance. They may have contacts that they can connect you with directly. As I mentioned before, if you do one of these independent internships where you find it on your own, you will need to do the petition process. That same link will take you to that application. Be aware of the deadlines for the petition process, because they are set deadlines throughout the year based off of when you plan to do your internship. But we've had quite a few students who they didn't really know of any organizations abroad, but they spoke with their professors who they were already speaking with on a regular basis, and just expressed their interest in doing an internship, or maybe they connected it to research, but they also were doing an internship with the research, and they were able to connect them to connections they have in other countries around the world. For instance, this student here, I think I'm going to feature him in the next slide. He's doing it. He did an internship in Colombia, and we also have these two students who did an internship, and they made that connection through their professor, and a professor we have here in the College of Arts and Letters, Dr. Larkins, and they did their internship in Brazil. So that's definitely an option, and it can kind of really help open that door for students, and make that kind of first introduction. And then again, you would then need to, on your own part, carry on that conversation, show them your resume, write up a cover letter, talking about the work you would like to do for their organization. Maybe they do have an internship program, and they'll ask you to then apply to it. But that sometimes just speaking with your professors can be a great way to kind of get that conversation going, and realizing what might be actually out there for you. Okay, so here's an example of a student who did this. We have Tiana, who did an internship in summer 2018. She's a women's studies and psychology double major, and she did an internship with the Institute of Gendered Studies in Tbilisi, Georgia. She secured her international internship in Tbilisi with the assistance of her professor, Dr. Huma Ghosh, who had led study abroad programs in Georgia and had several connections with local nonprofits and NGOs. So especially faculty, not only who do research, but who lead study abroad programs, maybe they've formed some connections in that country and they could make at least a first introduction for you. And that's exactly what Dr. Ghosh did for Tiana here. Tiana worked at the Institute of Gendered Studies and conducted interviews with internally displaced women in the, I'm going to say it wrong, Sezervarani resettlement to understand their experience and resilience, which was related to her research interest for her psychology major. So it kind of served two purposes. She was able to get more research experience, and then she was also able to create an internship program from that. Not all students do that, but this student did that. Okay, now that brings us to option 3, and this is kind of a reference I made previously about a program provider, which might not have made sense at the time. I hope after this, you'll finally understand what a program provider is. So some students will, in fact, when I say some, I mean the majority of students. This is really the option that most students will choose when trying to apply to this program, because they don't even know where to start when trying to, one, either find an internship on their own, or two, they don't really feel like they have connections with professors that might have done international work. So they will utilize a third-party company or a program provider that will facilitate the entire process of locating and securing an international internship for you. As I mentioned, this is the most popular option, and we have had many SDSU students who have ended up doing this this option when they applied for the scholarship. SDSU has numerous pre-approved program providers that's housed within Aztecs Abroad. I'm going to go over that in a little bit. But essentially, you will search our database that we have, and you can see all the options available to you. You're also welcome to find a program provider outside of what has been pre-approved. But again, anytime you do anything independent, an independent internship, you then need to do the petition process. So you might not need to do that. We have a lot of really great options that SDSU already has agreements with that are housed within Aztecs Abroad. I'm going to show you how to find that in a second. But things to keep in mind with program providers. So program providers are great. They can set up everything for you. Housing, sometimes even meals. They might even have cultural activities. And the most important part is the internship placement itself. You work with them, you do an interview, you let them know your interest, what kind of work experience you come with, and they will help place you in an internship. Now, typically the downside of a program provider is it's kind of expensive. I mean, you're paying a third-party company for their services to place you in an internship of your choice. The nice part with the scholarship, if you were to receive it, again, it's very competitive, is the scholarship can cover the cost associated with a program provider. So you can actually, in your budget, itemize for the amount that would go to the program provider for typically placing you with an internship. So that's something important to keep in mind. And that's a unique feature of a program provider, is they really will do the work for you. And oftentimes they have a guaranteed placement in your internship topic of choice. They're going to work with you individually to place you in the right type of internship. But if you want to do a sustainability internship or a healthcare internship, they'll really work with you to find a good option for you based on your previous skill sets and interest. Okay, so I might actually repeat myself a bit here, but I think it's important to kind of go over how a program provider works, because it's a unique concept that sometimes students are a little bit confused about. So as I mentioned, Aztecs Abroad has several pre-approved program providers that you can work with. Please note that there are both internship programs and service learning programs available. Service learning programs may also be eligible, but your program must fulfill the same criteria that we previously discussed. So for instance, it has to be 2 months in length. You must link the program to credit, and it still needs to be, with a nonprofit NGO, service-oriented in nature. Now, a lot of times service learning programs might be service-oriented in nature, but they don't have credit that comes with it, and they're usually typically really short. So it's up to you to create a program that's service-oriented, or find one that's at least 2 months in length, and you'll then likely have to take credit and link it. You'll probably do the SDSU credit option, where you do an independent study or you do an internship course at SDSU, so that your experience has been kind of linked to credit that you would receive. And then I kind of mentioned here in Aztecs Abroad, if you've never been to Aztecs Abroad, you can find it by going to sdsu.edu/aztecsabroad. On the main page, you'll see this kind of list of options, and you'll see at the bottom here, internship programs and service learning. And these, when you see it in Aztecs Abroad under these two options, that means it's already pre-approved. So you do not need to do the petition process for these specific companies that you're seeing. And we'll go into those in a second. So for instance, let's say I click here on CIS Abroad Internships. This is the page you will see. It's very important that you read through the entire page. The International Student Center has taken a lot of time to put the very important information on that page that you will need to go over. And you're actually gonna have to do 2 different applications for the internship, not for the scholarship. We're talking about the scholarship later. This is the application for the internship if you go through a program provider. So you would need to apply both to the program through Aztecs Abroad. So this is the Aztecs Abroad application, but you would also need to apply directly with the company. It's also very important that you can find the company link right here, like to the homepage for the CIS Abroad, and it'll take you directly to the page for internships. It's very important that you make sure you're aware of all deadlines, including the Mundt scholarship deadline, and we'll go over that in a little bit. So kind of going on from that, working with the program provider. So you have here the CIS Abroad website. And what's really great about working with program providers is it's a database, so you can filter. So you can filter by your academic interests, your future professional goal interests, or the location, or both. So you could say, you know, I would really like to do an education internship in Vietnam. And you can select those options, and then you can see, you know, what would be available for you with this company. And I kind of talked about how the program provider will be able to place you in an internship in the location field of your choice, and you will likely then have an interview with the program provider so they kind of get a sense of your interests, skill sets, and previous experience. So here's the important things you need to keep in mind. You may not know exactly what your internship placement will be until later in the application process, as all placements are custom fit. Make sure to gather as much information as possible about the placement. You will need to be as detailed as possible for the Mundt scholarship essay. It's okay to say that in your essay that the final placement is not yet known, but you will have to have an idea of what type of work you will be doing. And this is something the students always follow up with questions, because they're kind of struggling with, you know, but like when I reach out to CIS Abroad, they can't tell me what the internship is, but you need to know what it is for your application essay. And I know it's a little bit hard to kind of deal with not having all the information that you need. But I would say that if you're working with a program provider, you just got to let them know that you are applying to this scholarship. I can tell you that the contacts that I've worked with at CIS Abroad for internships, they are aware of the scholarship, and I've kind of alerted them so that they know that students might reach out wanting to gain more information, but might not be fully ready to commit to the internship because they're waiting to see if they've received the scholarship. So the general process will kind of go like this. So let's say you found that internship in Vietnam that's at an education internship, and you're really excited about it. So you go ahead and apply in Aztecs Abroad just to start that process. You might want to hold off on that first if you want to hear first from CIS Abroad, but you definitely will need to start an application in CIS Abroad to begin that conversation with them. You can't write your essay off of the limited information that they're going to give you on their website. I'll give you a fair warning, it will be very vague. So vague that you couldn't possibly use it to write a very strong essay for your application. You're going to have to work with the program provider to get more access or get more information so that you can write more substantively about the work that you would be doing at that organization. Because I believe the essay is a 500 word limit, and you really do need to go into detail about the work that you will be doing and why that's important. I'll go actually step by step through what the essay question is and how you should best answer it, but you need to understand at a pretty good, it could be pretty high level, but you need to get a sense of the type of work that you would be doing based on your conversations with the program provider. So when you start your application, for instance, in the CIS Abroad website, you'll work with an advisor, letting them know that you really are looking at, say, that internship in Vietnam, when you would like to go, and they will likely do a preliminary interview, kind of seeking more information from you, trying to see what would be a good placement for you. You will likely have to pay a deposit or application fee at the very early stage. At this point, you probably haven't even applied to the Mundt scholarship. You don't even know if you'll receive it. You have to be able to weigh whether, if you don't receive that scholarship, if you would be okay kind of having to cover the cost of that program application or deposit out of your own pocket. It's not usually a substantial amount. I think maybe like 200 or 300. It really depends on the organization, because they're going to essentially, they're working for you. They're working with their contacts on the ground to speak with various organizations, so they need to know how committed you are to this process. Nothing's really for free. You're kind of paying that middleman to do that work for you. So be aware of that. Know that if you work with a program provider, they're really great because they can do everything for you. But of course, there's a cost associated with that, and you might have to cover a bit of it out of your pocket, at least initially. Or if you don't receive a scholarship, you might have to at least carry that first payment, which is the smallest payment they usually have, out of your own pocket when you're working with them. So if you do receive the scholarship funds, they will not be dispersed until January 2021 for spring, summer, or fall 2021 internships. That's something to keep in mind. The scholarship application deadline and timeline has changed. It's changed essentially for your benefit. It's a lot earlier, but that means if you would have received the scholarship, you would actually receive the disbursement. You would receive the disbursement a lot earlier than you typically would. Typically before the application, the final program payment deadlines are with the program provider. So a huge lump sum of it wouldn't be out of your pocket. You would know by that point whether you received the scholarship, and therefore you could pay the program provider directly because you would have had that award amount dispersed to you by January 2021. And typically most payment deadlines, for instance, summer programs, might not be until March. So that's kind of helpful now for students with this new application process, which I'm going to get into shortly. And then again, for students who do not receive the scholarship, you then have to decide if you still wish to participate in the program, even if you didn't receive the scholarship. That's up to you. Some students will choose to continue on because they've become so excited about this internship opportunity. And some students, it's just simply not an option because maybe it costs $4,000 to do the internship. Because again, remember, program provider is covering housing, maybe food, transportation, cultural activities for 8 weeks. So that's kind of an expensive experience, especially for countries in more developed nations that have higher costs of living. So keep that in mind, that some of these options can be quite expensive. However, if you receive the scholarship, it can cover those costs, or almost all of those costs, which can be of great help to students who really want to have an international internship experience. Okay, so this is another question that I receive all the time, and they ask, what comes first? Do I apply to the Mundt application or the internship program provider application? Now that the application process has changed and it's in Aztec scholarships, it's a little bit clear what comes first, but it always kind of depends on what you're applying to and when the internship experience is. So the answer is still, it depends. But as the Mundt application for the scholarship is now due on August 15th, 2020 for the upcoming academic year, you will likely need to complete your scholarship application first. However, you may still need to know specific information about your internship placement in order to write a strong application essay. You will therefore need to start working with your program provider this summer in order to have gathered enough information to write about your preferred internship of choice. I've kind of already spoken about this, but you have to be able to speak in specifics about the internship you're going to be doing. You might not know the exact organization, but you need to state that you've already spoken, and you can literally list the advisor you've been working with at the program provider of your choice. And you can state that you have been working with so-and-so advisor to complete an internship in Vietnam at a local school or nonprofit. And the dates are from this date to that date, so that we can tell that it's definitely at least 8 weeks, but you're still waiting for final placement. We understand, the committee understands, that you can't possibly know where you're going to be placed. You likely won't know where you're placed until probably a month before you depart for your country. So those very specific details won't be available, but you at least need to state what type of internship, the type of work you will be doing. So this is where having that conversation with the advisor would be really important. They can tell you the type of work that you would be responsible for so that you can speak about that in your essay. You don't need to always have the exact details, but you need to be able to speak or to write in a fairly detailed way about the internship experience. Okay, so now we're on to the application process. It's changed this year. It's now housed in Aztec Scholarships, which is the new system that is currently live. It launched on March 1st. So there's this long application cycle that now exists in Aztec Scholarships. It's from March 1st to August 15th. Some scholarships do have a different cycle, so keep that in mind. But for the purpose of the Mundt Scholarship for International Internships, it is within this larger application window. So in order to find, you're welcome to just go to Aztec Scholarships, but I would really encourage you to go to this page here that I've highlighted, calabroad.sdsu.edu/Mundt. I have put together a step-by-step list of instructions for the kind of the order you need to follow for the application, because it is confusing. If you go through a program provider, you're going to apply for 3 different applications. It's confusing. We know that, and we're trying to make it as, you know, as kind of as clear a process as possible. So step 1 here, you see, and this will always be your first step, is that students must complete the general application in Aztec Scholarships. The nice thing about Aztec Scholarships is that it will pre-match you for scholarships that you are eligible for based on how you answered questions in the general application. Go ahead, fill out the general application. It shouldn't take you very long. I've heard it only takes about 30 minutes. There are some short answer questions. I would, as a just general recommendation, it doesn't have any bearing on this particular scholarship, but I would write those general kind of short paragraph little sentences, write them well, because other committees might use those to see whether you're a good fit or you would receive that scholarship, that merit-based or competitive scholarship. So go ahead and complete the general application in Aztec Scholarships. It shouldn't take you very long. And this is the most important part in relation to the Mundt Scholarship, is that when completing the general application, you need to indicate that you plan to study abroad in the next academic year. There's going to be a question that will ask you, do you plan to study abroad during the next academic year? You have to select yes. When you select yes and you finish the general application, it will then show you a list of recommended opportunities that you are likely eligible for, but that require an extra step. So that general application, the reason I talked about it being nice is it will pre-match you with scholarships you're eligible for. You will find that, wow, you just received a scholarship for $500 for this one scholarship you never knew existed. It pre-matched you for some other scholarships that you didn't need to do any extra supplemental steps for. The Mundt Scholarship, though, definitely requires supplemental materials. It's quite, you know, a detailed process that needs to be completed. That's why you need to have that list of recommended opportunities. But the general application is pretty great in that it'll help you figure out what you're eligible for, and you might not even need to do anything for some of those scholarships. But for the Mundt Scholarship for International Internships, you should see it listed among the options for recommended opportunities. You then have to take extra steps to apply to those recommended opportunities. Apply to all of them you're recommended for, honestly, if you can. But for the Mundt Scholarship, you'll at least then see the essay question. You'll see, the deadline is definitely August 15th, and you'll need to apply by that date. But you're not quite ready to just send off an application. There's definitely a lot of steps that have to be done in the meantime. So step one, just do the general application so that you will be pre-matched, hopefully, with some scholarships, and then you can then see the Mundt Scholarship for International Internships. Step three is then to thoroughly read through the below section. And when I say that, I mean on this page. I'll go ahead and just navigate to this just so you can see it a little bit clearer. But this is the page that has a lot of helpful information for you. This presentation will also be on that page eventually. But it first goes over the scholarship, which we've already talked about. And then under here, you're being told to carefully read through each section below to learn more. And I'm very serious. You need to read through all of these so that you can write the strongest, you can be the strongest candidate for this scholarship. The application process. So you'll have this here, read through. And then I'll talk about this more at the end of the presentation. So you want to read through all of these, and then you're ready to prepare your essay in a separate Word document. And before August 15th, then you need to submit your essay in Aztec Scholarships by the deadline. You would copy and paste it from a Word document into this kind of window for the essay. But don't try to apply to the essay right away, because there's a lot of information that you need to first gather and kind of figure out how you're going to make this internship work before you can really apply. So that's why I kind of have the steps written down this way. I'm going to go over some of these really quickly, just because you'll then see what kind of information is provided. But this is what we've kind of already covered, locating an internship, the 3 different options we talked about. It has a link here to the petition process, just to make that easier to find. Working with a program provider, which we've already been talking about. This again provides more information. So this presentation coupled with this information provided on this website, you really should have all the information you need. However, I will also be offering a live Q&A, kind of like office hours, Zoom sessions throughout the summer, where you can just log on to the live Q&A and ask your very specific question, and we can kind of troubleshoot, what the issue is, how best to approach it, and how to move forward. Or you might have very specific questions about your essay or application, and I can work with you during those live Q&A sessions, and I'll show you let you know when those are at the end of this presentation. But you have to watch this presentation and you have to read through this information first, because it's likely your question will probably be answered in these materials. And then again, I talk about here all the deadlines. You can kind of figure out what comes first. You really should make a timeline for yourself to figure out, when is the deadline for your program provider if you're using that, or when is the deadline with the organization that you would like to intern with, if they have a commitment deadline. Figure out all of that time frame that you're working with, so you can really be on top of it. And then this is a really important part, is here are the list of the pre-approved internships, service learning, and volunteer programs. Again, I have here stated that previous Mundt alumni have participated in both traditional international internships as well as international service learning and volunteer programs, so long as the program you choose is at least 8 weeks in length, which is 2 months, and addresses social welfare, health, educational, cultural, or environmental problems, or social and economic inequalities, the program should be eligible. So you can do these, but sometimes you see them for 2 weeks, a 2-week-long service learning program with ISA that wouldn't be eligible. So you would need to find a way to do an 8-week-long one, just to kind of give you some advice about the different types of programs you can do. I also list here important things to keep in mind. A lot of this is going to be redundant from the presentation, but it's really there as a reference for you, so you can kind of check back to make sure as you're working on your application, check these things off to make sure that you're doing okay. And then this is kind of a nice part where I actually have some alumni. I'm going to continue to add to this page, but basically you can see what have other previous SDSU students done, what kind of internships have they done, and you can see the type of internship and the location. And some of these students located on their own, some of them used a program provider, and you can hear from them, which is really helpful. I know students want to hear from other students. This is your chance to hear their response to kind of some of the most common questions that students will have for other program scholarship alumni. Okay, so back to the presentation. All right, so this link will take you to all of that, and this is where you really want to make sure to use this resource, review all these materials. It's there for your benefit, and it really should make it pretty clear how to go about the application process. Okay, so the application components. You already know about the general application. You have to do that first. And then under the recommended opportunity, Mundt scholarship application should pop up. You will need to prepare an essay, which we've talked quite a bit about already. I'll go into even more detail so that you understand exactly what is expected of you, as well as a budget. I think the next slide is, well, not actually budget, but budget will come up shortly. So now we're going to talk about those two components that are really important for the specific Mundt scholarship. These are general tips I give for students to put together a strong essay for essentially any scholarship, a study abroad scholarship application, or study abroad scholarship essay. But it definitely applies for this program as well, or this scholarship. Start working on your essay early. This presentation is available at the beginning of, or the end of the academic year, beginning of summer. You have several months to work on this. I mean, you definitely, and things are, kind of boring right now as we're all working from home, so you'll have a lot of time to do this. Do not wait until the last minute to try to put this together. We can typically tell the essays that were thrown together last minute. They are usually very weak and really never make it to the final kind of round of when we have to make our selection of essays or of applications. So start working on your essay early, start trying to figure out all the details of the internship that you would like to complete early, because it takes time to work through those details, figure out the credit aspect, figure out, if you can do an internship at that one organization or work with a certain program provider. So take time on that aspect. And then just more specifically for the essay, things like grammar, spelling, sentence structure, flow, they are all important. If the content is great, but it's written in such a poor way that we struggle to understand what you're trying to say, you won't really get the scholarship because it's just not strong. It's not overall strong. And we definitely have a rubric, and that is one of the components on the rubric, is just to make sure that it's, it's written in a way that it's very strong. And you are encouraged. I know the Writing Center is doing remote assistance for kind of their traditional Writing Center that they would offer in Love Library. Utilize that service. Have multiple people look over your essay. It just makes it stronger, because when you look at your essay, you just miss things because you've just been looking at it for so long. So really take that time to have another set of eyes look over your essay and utilize the Writing Center so that you can submit an essay that's essentially free of all of those, grammar, spelling, sentence structure errors. And then of course you might be able to work with professors or friends or family members that you also trust to have their kind of opinion about what you've put together. This is also, I've kind of already talked about this, but if you haven't already realized, you have to be very specific in your essay. You cannot speak in broad general terms about the internship, because we just don't know if it's feasible or that you're really going to move forward with this internship if we were to award you the funds. We need to know very specifically that it's realistic that you will do this particular internship, because you've really laid it out for us, that we understand exactly how you're going to go ahead and go about this process and actually do the internship in that country of your choice. try to draw direct lines between the internship placement and your long-term goals. It's not just enough to explain what you're going to do. We'll go over the essay prompt in a little bit, or I think it's the next slide. But you have to draw those direct connections. Don't just list things off. Like, try to connect it all. Understand, like, if you're doing this internship, why is this related to your long-term goals? Maybe you want to be a nurse and work on public health. How will do it working, in a clinic environment? How will it help you achieve that goals? You can't just assume that we would know. You need to really write a compelling argument for why you are a strong candidate and how you will go on to do X, Y, and Z after you graduate. And this internship will directly help you reach those goals that you have discussed. So make those direct connections between the internship that you're proposing and your long-term goals. And remember, this is a service-oriented nature. So the more that you can write about how this internship will help you achieve, goals that are service-oriented in nature. Maybe you want to work for a nonprofit, or maybe you want to do things that will have a positive impact on society. Talk about those things. Those are really important, and it helps kind of paint that picture for us for why you are a really great candidate for this scholarship. And then this is really important. You have to answer every single part of the essay prompt. Students, there's like 7 or 8 different parts to it. We'll go over it in a second. They sometimes just randomly skip one part. And we have a rubric where we grade for every single part of it. So then they just lost. Maybe they wrote a really exceptional essay for all the other points, and then they just left one out. And then we have to deduct them those points, and it really hurts their total score, and they might not get it in the end. So you have to answer every single part. Okay, so as I mentioned, here is the essay prompt, as well as some little helpful notes and tips. I'm not going to go through all of these because you can kind of pause this presentation and read the notes and tips that I'm providing to kind of help you understand, why are we asking that particular point in this essay? This essay it's one of those questions that's like broad, and then make sure you include the following components. You're welcome to do it in whatever order you want, but you need to address every single point that's asked of you in the prompt. And then this kind of note kind of gives you a little example of what we mean or why this is important. So I'll let you just read through these aspects, but this is here for you as kind of a resource to understand, how to go about your essay prompt. And then again, here's some, so this is the second component of it. One of the ones I want to kind of address, because I feel like all of these, it's pretty clear, how you should go about making sure to cover that component in your essay. But one I want to just point out, because it's one of those, I talked about how students leave out a certain component of their essay, and this is always the one they leave out, is how will your experience help you enrich and inform the SDSU campus while you are abroad and after you return from home? Students just tend to think like, oh, that's after I come back, it's not that important. It's important like why I'm going there. It's all important. If it's in the essay prompt, it means we really want to know. Students tend to just brush over this question and not really address it. This is where you can be really creative. You can talk about, and this is kind of that question we're asking you, how will you pay it forward? If you receive a scholarship, you're going to be given an incredible opportunity. We want this, the donors, when they created the scholarship, they had in mind that it would be mutually beneficial. It's going to help you clearly because you're getting more work experience. You're going to go off and do amazing things in your life, hopefully, and this internship will have been a major aspect of you being able to achieve that. But also, and you're going to hopefully receive a lot of benefits from your host community. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be able to also make contributions at your organization that will benefit that community. But we're also thinking about, well, what's the benefit, the long-term benefit when you return? What's that multiplier effect? How is it going to have a positive impact in your local community. That can be at SDSU, that can be in your home community, that can be in the community that you want to work in. But be very creative about what you would do to help enrich and inform the SDSU campus. This could be a presentation, a workshop, you know, a concert. I mean, who knows? Do whatever you want. We love ones that are creative and different because we think if the student has been that specific, it means they've really given them a lot of thought, and we get really excited about a student who's that invested in this experience and wants to share it and pay it forward, so that the next generation of students can then learn about the scholarship or learn about the experience that student had, and maybe that'll bring the idea into their head that, wow, I really want to do an internship abroad, or I want to work in this field because this student has inspired me. So that's just one kind of component of the prompt that I'm highlighting. It's all important, but don't brush over that component. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. So I talked about the budget. All applicants will need to complete a budget for their proposed program. If awarded, the scholarship committee bases the award amount off of this budget. If it is therefore very important that you accurately capture the associated cost of your internship experience. So here you can see the budget. This is linked, or there's a URL to it, I believe, on the application page in Aztec Scholarships for the Mundt scholarship. So this is where you will find this budget form when you apply, but I'm giving it to you now so you can kind of think about, here are all the things that you're going to need to consider as you're looking for the cost. Tuition and fees. If you're going to do an independent study, how many units are you taking? You can take as few as 1, you can do 2 or 3 or 4. Well, no, I guess you would do 3 or 6 or whatever is typical and in the catalog. But you need to list that here. Housing, if you work through a program provider, they're going to give you most likely a lump sum. You can, if you work with a program provider, just put on here what that lump sum is and just make sure to indicate what that comprises. So if you are doing a homestay where all your meals are included, then you wouldn't need to like list individually for housing and meals, because you're saying the program provider costs $3,000, which includes housing and meals and whatnot. Round trip airfare, you will need to run searches and you'll need to figure out how much will a flight from San Diego or wherever you would be flying from to Vietnam or wherever you would like to go cost. Flights are pretty variable, so it's okay to kind of round up to make sure that if the cost of flights shifts or changes from when the time you wrote your application or completed your budget to when you would actually need to purchase the flight, that you would have a little bit of wiggle room. But you need to do that research on the front end. Local transportation. If you don't know what transportation costs in Vietnam, you need to do research. You need to figure that out. This is kind of like writing a grant where you have to figure out how much funds do you need. This scholarship isn't a blank $300 or $400 scholarship. We'll actually try to cover the entire cost of your experience, but you have to let us know, how much does that experience cost? If you don't, make sure to determine what these costs are pretty well at the early stages, you might find that you only received a scholarship for a portion of what you would actually need to pay because you didn't take the time to really figure out what those associated costs are. So you would go through all of those, just do your own research. It might not be applicable. For instance, maybe you don't need to purchase books or supplies, but maybe you do if you're doing a research project with it as well. Required health insurance. I list that here, that if you are doing for 2-month program, that would be $140. So you can click on this link to read more about it, but the CSU has a mandated, it's called FTIP, Foreign Travel Insurance Program. Housing, if you're not working with a program provider, you'll need to do your own research and figure out what is the cost of housing. Be mindful that you need to be conservative with the housing that you stay at. You cannot stay in lavish, luxurious hotel for 8 weeks. This budget, we don't have the budget for that. You have to do something that's comparable to student housing or a budget hotel or something like that. So, and if if we find something that seems exorbitant, the amount, we would just not award that. We would do our own research and reallocate the amount for that, that line item. So on the front end, you need to make sure you're looking at the appropriate costs. Meals, if you're not going through a program provider, you would need to then run a search for, what is the cost of living in your proposed location? How many meals what would that cost per day? And then times that by the number of days in country. And that's usually the best way to figure out what your budget will be for food. Local transportation, research how you will get around in that country, and then run searches of what that would cost per day, and then times that by the number of days in country. And that's how you would create your budget. This is good practice for students who would like to become grad students. You might have to apply for a grant, and it's a similar type of process. Okay, so we're basically at the end of our presentation, but I wanted to kind of highlight some of the previous Mundt Scholar awardees and what they have done and where they have gone on to study. So we have Tyler here. I kind of mentioned him. He was a 2008 scholar, and he studied in Columbia, and he did an internship with the Violence Prevention Organization there. We have Danny, who was a sustainability student and did a sustainability internship where he taught students about sustainability in local schools, and he worked through a program provider called ISA, and he was in Spain. We have here Nancy, and she worked with the UN, and she worked with a program provider that helped place her in that internship. It wasn't an approved SDSU approved program provider, so she had to do a petition process for this in this instance, and so did Tyler. We have Rivani, who did a Mundt scholarship, or received a Mundt scholarship, and did an internship / research project in Bangladesh, and it was related to her, I believe, PhD work, and it was at an organization I think called Arches, as well as Kristen, who did an internship in Madagascar. She was doing a sustainability related internship, and she worked with IVHQ, which is typically one of those volunteer organizations, and oftentimes those tend to be very short duration. So she just made sure to extend hers to be an 8-week program as opposed to like 2 or 3 weeks, which they sometimes are. So you can do those volunteer service learning, but you would need to then, one, you have to link it to credit. So she had to determine how she was going to do that, and then she made sure to have a program that was at least 2 months in length. Okay, that's the majority of this presentation. It's all been covered, but I will, as I mentioned, be hosting live Q&A sessions all throughout the summer to help you as you're working on your application essay and as you are trying to figure out what internship you would like to propose for your application, and as you're working with program providers and whatnot. So this link, you can click on it. Again, this will be embedded on the website that I already mentioned on calabroad.sdsu.edu/Mundt. And here are the specific times that I'm offering. I have lots of different times, lots of different dates, days of the week. So hopefully you can find something that works for you. You can also, this form here is you need to register for these because I want to have a sense of how many students will be attending. I will also send out reminders to students who have registered. So please fill out this form to select the dates and the time that you would like to attend a live Q&A session, and come with specific questions. It's kind of, think of this as kind of like the writing center, where you need to come with specific questions as opposed to just like, you can't just help someone help you with your writing. You have to have something for them to work with. So, bring your questions that are specific, and I will hopefully be able to answer them. But make sure you've watched this presentation. If you're on this slide, you probably have, and also that you've read pretty thoroughly through that information on the calabroad.sdsu.edu/Mundt website, which provides a lot of helpful information. I hope you apply to this scholarship. It's an amazing opportunity. Students have gone on to do some phenomenal things, both with their internships and then when they return, their future careers. and their life after SDSU. That's the goal of this scholarship, is we want students to go on and continue to do service-oriented or work for the public good, and being inspired by their experience and have that opportunity to do work that typically you're not compensated with doing service-oriented internships. And this is a way that it won't be a financial burden for you if you do receive a scholarship. Those costs will be covered. So we're excited to receive your scholarship. The application deadline is August 15th, 2020, and we can't read to hear where you would like to internship or complete your internship. Thanks so much. Bye.